Behind Dorothy Dandridge's groundbreaking Oscar-nominated performance lurked a French lawsuit, an explosive film set, a 19-year-old music student hired for $300, and a director who tricked censors by filming two versions of steamy scenes only to use the racier ones anyway. Fact 1. Banned in France for 27 years over lyrics. Carmen Jones couldn't be shown in French movie theaters for more than 25 years after its release, and the reason had nothing to do with the film's content or performances. The heirs of the original opera's librettists took 20th Century Fox to court over a copyright issue involving the lyrics, and they won. From 1954 until 1981, French audiences were legally barred from seeing this groundbreaking film in their local cinemas, even though the movie was playing successfully in theaters across the rest of the world. The problem stemmed from a technicality in French copyright law. Oscar Hammerstein II had written entirely new English lyrics to go with Georges Bizet's classic opera music, updating the story and setting it in World War II-era America with an all-black cast. The descendants of Henri Mailhac and Ludovic Halévy, who wrote the original French libretto for Bizet's 1875 opera Carmen, argued that Fox didn't have the right to use different words with Bizet's music. French courts sided with the librettist's heirs, ruling that the studio had violated their rights by altering the original lyrics. What makes this ban even stranger is that the film was actually permitted to open the 1955 Cannes Film Festival despite the court ruling. Cannes is one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world, and takes place in France every year, so Carmen Jones could be shown at this special event but nowhere else in the country. French film fans who wanted to see Dorothy Dandridge's historic, Oscar-nominated performance had to wait nearly 3 decades, or travel outside France to catch it in theaters. Fact 2. Children's chorus filmed at Working Dynamite Factory. Director Otto Preminger wanted Carmen Jones to feel as authentic as possible, but his choice of filming location for one particular scene raises eyebrows even today. While studio records show that almost the entire movie was shot on the Fox lot in Hollywood, there was one notable exception that seems almost unbelievable by modern safety standards. The children's chorus scenes were filmed on location at an actual working dynamite factory, with active explosives production happening all around the young performers. What makes this decision even more shocking is how casually everyone treated the dangerous environment. The parents of the child actors were present during filming, as required by law for working minors, but many of them spent their time sitting on wooden boxes that contained dynamite and other explosives. Even more remarkably, several parents were spotted idly smoking cigarettes while perched on these boxes of explosives, seemingly unconcerned about the potential catastrophe that could unfold from one stray ash or spark. This was 1954, an era when workplace safety regulations and filming protocols were far less strict than they are today. The casual attitude toward danger that characterized mid-century America extended even to Hollywood film sets, where the drive to capture authentic locations sometimes outweighed common-sense safety precautions. Preminger was known for his demanding directing style and his determination to get exactly what he wanted on screen, and apparently that included filming children singing at a facility where explosive materials were being manufactured. It's hard to imagine any modern film production getting insurance approval for such a risky shoot, let alone convincing parents to bring their children anywhere near live explosives. Fact 3. Legendary jazz drummer Max Roach cameos. Hidden among the cast of Carmen Jones is one of the most influential jazz drummers in history, though you might miss him if you're not paying close attention. Max Roach, who would go on to become a bebop pioneer and one of the most celebrated percussionists in jazz history, makes a brief but memorable appearance in the film during a nightclub sequence. He plays a drummer performing on stage, and the scene includes a fantastic drum solo that showcases his incredible talent. The moment happens during the introduction to the Gypsy song, when Pearl Bailey's character Frankie is about to perform. Roach sits behind his drum kit and launches into an electrifying solo that gets the crowd fired up, and as he plays, you can hear people in the scene shouting, "Go, Max," to encourage him. The filmmakers left his real name in the movie, turning what could have been just another background performance into a genuine cameo appearance by a jazz legend. At the time of filming in 1954, Roach was already making waves in the jazz world as a virtuoso drummer who helped revolutionize the sound of modern jazz. Just a year after Carmen Jones was released, he would form the legendary Clifford Brown Max Roach Quintet, which became one of the most important jazz groups of the 1950s. His appearance in the film came during a brief period when he had relocated to Los Angeles and was playing with a group called the Lighthouse All-Stars. What makes this cameo particularly special is that Roach appears on camera actually playing the drums himself, not just pretending for the cameras. His technical skill and musical artistry shine through even in this short scene, giving audiences a glimpse of the talent that would make him a jazz icon. Fact 4. Saul Bass's very first title sequence. The stunning opening credits of Carmen Jones hold a special place in film history because they represent the very first title sequence ever created by Saul Bass, who would go on to become the most famous and influential title designer in cinema. Bass had recently moved from New York to Los Angeles to establish his graphic design practice when he was hired by Otto Preminger to create promotional materials for the film. Preminger was so impressed with the movie poster Bass designed that he took a chance and asked him to also design the opening title sequence, even though Bass had never done anything like it before. The sequence Bass created features two simple but powerful symbolic elements layered together throughout the credits: a delicate line drawing of a rose and footage of perpetual flames superimposed over one another. Bass chose these images because he felt they captured the emotional heart of the story, where love, lust, greed, betrayal, and rage become tangled and impossible to separate from each other. The rose appears as a timid sketch against the red-tinted live-action fire, and neither element is given a clear symbolic meaning, which mirrors the confusion and moral ambiguity that drives the plot. This first collaboration between Bass and Preminger launched a professional relationship that would span multiple films and help revolutionize how Hollywood thought about opening credits. Before Bass came along, title sequences were typically just boring lists of names that audiences ignored or used as time to buy popcorn. Bass realized that titles could set the mood and draw viewers into the story from the very first frame. His work on Carmen Jones proved so successful that it opened the door to a 40-year career designing iconic sequences for directors like Alfred Hitchcock and Martin Scorsese. Fact 5. Extraordinarily long shot lengths. Otto Preminger made an unusual stylistic choice with Carmen Jones that sets it apart from nearly every other Hollywood film of its era. The entire movie contains just 169 individual shots across 103 minutes of running time, which works out to an average shot length of roughly 36 seconds. To put that in perspective, most Hollywood films made during the 1950s used an average shot length of only 8 to 10 seconds, meaning Preminger's shots lasted about 4 times longer than what audiences were accustomed to seeing. This deliberate approach created a viewing experience that feels more like watching a stage performance than a typical movie. Preminger let scenes play out in long, unbroken takes that allowed the actors to develop their performances without constant cuts interrupting the flow. In some cases, these extended shots run for several minutes at a time, with the camera following characters as they move through spaces or holding steady while multiple people sing and interact in a single frame. One particularly impressive example comes during a nightclub sequence in the middle of the film, where the camera follows a group of 5 characters across the room to a table in a continuous take that lasts just under 5 minutes. Throughout this shot, different characters are singing simultaneously at various points, and the camera movement has to be precisely choreographed to capture all the action. Dorothy Dandridge's opening area also famously runs for about 4 to 5 minutes and uses only 3 total shots, allowing her magnetic performance to hold the screen without any editing tricks. This patient, theatrical approach to filming was bold for a big-budget Hollywood musical in CinemaScope, but it gave Carmen Jones a distinctive look and rhythm that helps the operatic performances feel more immediate and powerful. Fact 6. Marilyn Horne was a USC student hired for $300. The voice that audiences hear when Dorothy Dandridge sings in Carmen Jones doesn't actually belong to her, and the story of how that voice was cast involves a last-minute emergency and a bargain that seems almost unbelievable. Originally, a professional singer named Katherine Hilgenberg was hired to provide the operatic vocals for the Carmen character. Hilgenberg was a soloist with the Roger Wagner Chorale, which would later become the Los Angeles Master Chorale, and she had already recorded several of the arias with piano accompaniment on a separate track when production hit a major snag. Director Otto Preminger had a reputation for being difficult and verbally abusive on set, and Hilgenberg eventually had enough of his bullying behavior and walked off the project. This left the production in a tight spot because they needed someone who could match Dandridge's speaking voice while also having the technical skill to handle the challenging operatic music. That's when 19-year-old Marilyn Horne entered the picture. Horne was studying music at the University of Southern California at the time, just a short drive from the Fox studios where Carmen Jones was being made. She auditioned for the role and impressed everyone enough to get hired immediately, despite her young age and lack of professional film experience. The production paid her just $300 for her work, which even by 1954 standards was an incredibly low amount for dubbing the lead role in a major studio picture. Horne later recalled spending many hours working closely with Dandridge to study her voice and mannerisms, doing everything possible to make the dubbed vocals sound like they could have come from Dandridge herself if she had been trained to sing opera. Fact 7. Eartha Kitt refused the role over dubbing. Before Dorothy Dandridge landed the iconic title role in Carmen Jones, the studio had their eyes on another talented performer who could have brought something entirely different to the character. Eartha Kitt, who was already making a name for herself as a distinctive singer and performer, was offered the chance to play Carmen, but she walked away from the opportunity over a condition she found unacceptable. The studio executives told Kitt that if she took the role, her singing voice would need to be dubbed by an operatic singer to give the character the proper classical sound that matched Bizet's music. Kitt refused outright because she wanted to use her own natural voice, which had a unique, sultry quality that had already become her trademark. She felt strongly that her authentic vocal style was essential to any performance she gave, and she wasn't willing to compromise on that point even for a major Hollywood film role. Her decision stood in stark contrast to other cast members who were offered the same deal and accepted it without hesitation. Harry Belafonte agreed to have his singing voice dubbed by Laverne Hutcherson, even though he was an accomplished singer with a successful recording career. Diahann Carroll, who ended up playing the smaller role of Mert in the film, also accepted the dubbing arrangement without protest. The only major cast member who didn't need to worry about dubbing was Pearl Bailey, who played Carmen's friend Frankie. Bailey got to use her own voice because her character's songs were comedic and jazzy rather than operatic, so her natural singing style fit perfectly with what the role required. Kitt's refusal to be dubbed ultimately meant she lost out on the part, but she maintained her artistic integrity and went on to build a legendary career on her own terms. Fact 8. Dorothy Dandridge, first Black Best Actress nominee. Dorothy Dandridge's performance in Carmen Jones shattered a barrier that had stood since the Academy Awards began in 1929. When the nominations were announced for the 27th Academy Awards ceremony held on March 30, 1955, Dandridge became the first African-American woman ever nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress in a leading role. This was a monumental achievement in an era when Hollywood rarely gave black actresses substantial roles, let alone leading parts in major studio productions. The competition Dandridge faced in her category represented some of the biggest names in Hollywood at the peak of their careers. She was nominated alongside Grace Kelly for The Country Girl, Audrey Hepburn for Sabrina, Judy Garland for A Star is Born, and Jane Wyman for Magnificent Obsession. These were all powerhouse performers in films that had received significant critical acclaim and studio backing, making Dandridge's nomination even more remarkable given the challenges she faced as a black actress working in a segregated industry. Ultimately, Grace Kelly took home the Oscar that night for her dramatic turn in The Country Girl, but Dandridge's nomination itself was the real victory. The recognition from the Academy validated her talent on the highest level and proved that audiences and critics were ready to acknowledge black performers as serious artists deserving of top honors. On November 1, 1954, shortly after Carmen Jones premiered, Dandridge had already made history by becoming the first black woman featured on the cover of Life magazine, and the Oscar nomination cemented her status as a trailblazer who was opening doors for future generations of black actresses in Hollywood. Fact 9. Preminger's clever censorship trick. Otto Preminger had a long history of clashing with Hollywood's censorship office, and he found a creative way to outsmart them while making Carmen Jones. On April 14, 1954, just 6 weeks before filming was scheduled to begin, Preminger received a concerning letter from Joseph Breen, who was in his final months as head of the Motion Picture Production Code Office. Breen had already battled with Preminger over his previous film The Moon is Blue and still held a grudge about that director's success in releasing it without official approval. Breen raised serious objections to the Carmen Jones screenplay, citing what he called an overemphasis on lustfulness and expressing outrage that the script failed to include any voice of morality properly condemning Carmen's complete lack of morals. Rather than fight Breen directly this time, Preminger appeared to cooperate by agreeing to make some minor adjustments to the script. He then took things a step further by actually filming 2 different versions of the scenes that Breen found objectionable. One toned down, and one with the original controversial content intact. When it came time to show his work to the censorship office, Preminger strategically screened the tamer versions of those scenes and received the official stamp of approval he needed. Once he had that green light from the production code office, Preminger quietly swapped in the more controversial versions for the final cut of the film that audiences would see in theaters. This clever bait and switch allowed him to preserve his artistic vision while technically satisfying the censors, proving once again that he was willing to bend the rules to make the movie he wanted to make. Fact 10. Secret affair led to forced abortion. The relationship between Dorothy Dandridge and Otto Preminger went far beyond the typical director-actress dynamic and led to one of the most troubling episodes in her life. In May of 1954, just weeks before filming was set to begin, Dandridge started having serious doubts about her ability to play Carmen and told her agent she wanted to back out of the project. Preminger drove to her apartment personally to reassure her and convince her to stay with the film, and according to Dandridge's own autobiography, that evening unexpectedly sparked a passionate affair between the two of them that would continue for the next 4 years. The relationship was complicated from the start because Preminger was married and had no intention of leaving his wife, though Dandridge didn't fully understand that at first. As both her director and her lover, Preminger took on a mentorship role and frequently gave her career advice, though much of that guidance would later prove harmful to her prospects in Hollywood. In 1955, Dandridge became pregnant with Preminger's child, which should have been a moment of joy but instead became a devastating turning point. 20th Century Fox studio executives, who had just signed Dandridge to a lucrative 3-year contract and were positioning her as the first African-American female screen star, had a financial interest in maintaining her image as a glamorous sex symbol. They pressured Dandridge to terminate the pregnancy, essentially telling her she could either have the abortion or lose her career. Dandridge went through with the procedure, and the traumatic experience combined with the realization that Preminger would never leave his wife finally ended their affair for good. Fact 11. Belafonte nearly strangled Dandridge. During filming, Harry Belafonte's performance in the tragic final scene of Carmen Jones was so intense that it almost became dangerous for his co-star. The climax of the film follows the original opera's plot, where Joe strangles Carmen to death in a fit of jealous rage after she rejects him for another man. This emotionally charged scene required Belafonte to portray a man pushed beyond his breaking point, and he threw himself into the performance with complete commitment. During one take of the strangulation scene, Belafonte became so absorbed in the raw emotions of the moment that he went for a genuinely passionate stranglehold on Dorothy Dandridge's neck. Before things could go too far, director Otto Preminger shouted, "Cut! Cut!" and halted the scene, clearly annoyed by what he was seeing. Belafonte looked up to see Preminger positioned on top of the boom-shot crane, calling down to him with a specific note about his technique. In his autobiography, Belafonte recalled Preminger's exact words delivered in his thick German accent. "Mr. Belafonte, when you choke the leading lady in the movies, you do not put wrinkles in her neck." The director's concern wasn't about Dandridge's safety or comfort, but rather about maintaining the visual perfection of the shot. Preminger needed the scene to look violent and passionate without leaving any visible marks or creases on Dandridge's skin that would ruin the carefully crafted cinematography. Belafonte had to find the right balance for the next take, making his performance look furious and homicidal without actually applying enough pressure to distort Dandridge's appearance on camera. He managed to get it right, and the final version of the scene is widely praised as one of the most powerful moments in the film. Fact 12. Dorothy transformed to win the role. Dorothy Dandridge had to fight hard to convince Otto Preminger that she was right for the title role in Carmen Jones, and her strategy for changing his mind was both bold and brilliantly theatrical. When Preminger was casting the film, he was already familiar with Dandridge's work, but he had serious doubts about whether she could play a character as sexually charged and dangerous as Carmen. He had recently seen her performance as a demure schoolteacher in the film Bright Road, where she had deliberately dressed down and played a conservative, buttoned-up character. At their first meeting to discuss Carmen Jones, Dandridge showed up looking polished and sophisticated, dressed elegantly with gloves and a Peter Pan collar that gave her a refined, upper-class appearance. Preminger told her bluntly that she had too much of a veneer and looked like a model or a beautiful butterfly, but definitely not like Carmen. He even went so far as to say he'd seen her walking down Fifth Avenue with a red coat flying behind her, cementing his image of her as someone too classy for the role. Instead, he suggested she audition for the much smaller part of Cindy Lou, Joe's sweet and innocent fiancée. Dandridge took the script and left, but she wasn't ready to give up on playing Carmen. She returned for another meeting completely transformed, working with Max Factor makeup artists to create the exact look and attitude of the earthy, seductive Carmen she had envisioned. She dressed provocatively and carried herself with the dangerous sensuality the character demanded. This dramatic transformation, combined with Preminger watching footage of her in a 1941 performance where she was more free and uninhibited, finally convinced him to give her a screen test and ultimately the starring role. Fact 13. All star singing voices never met their characters. One of the most surprising aspects of Carmen Jones is that none of the lead actors actually sang their own parts, even though several of them were accomplished singers in real life. Otto Preminger made the decision to dub all the main singing roles with classically trained opera voices because he wanted the film to have an authentic operatic sound that matched the grandeur of Bizet's original score. This meant that audiences heard one set of voices coming from the mouths of actors they were watching on screen, creating a strange disconnect between the performers and the vocals. Dorothy Dandridge's singing was provided by Marilyn Horne, who worked closely with Dandridge to study her voice and mannerisms so the dubbing would feel seamless. Harry Belafonte, despite being a successful recording artist and folk singer, had his voice replaced by Laverne Hutcherson for all the operatic numbers. Joe Adams, who played the prizefighter Husky Miller, was dubbed by Marvin Hayes, and even some of the supporting characters received vocal stand-ins, with Diahan Carroll's character Mert being sung by Bernice Peterson. Interestingly, the dubbing extended to some unusual arrangements within the cast itself. Roy Glenn, who played Husky Miller's manager Rum Daniels, had his singing voice provided by Brock Peters, who also appeared in the film as Sergeant Brown. The only major cast member who sang with her own voice was Pearl Bailey, who played Frankie, because her character's jazzy, comedic songs didn't require operatic training, and her natural singing style fit perfectly with what the role needed. The extensive dubbing remained a closely guarded secret during the film's initial release to maintain the illusion for audiences. Fact 14. No major studio would finance it. Otto Preminger knew from the beginning that getting Carmen Jones made would be an uphill battle, and his instincts proved correct when he started shopping the project around Hollywood. He realized that no major studio would be interested in financing an operatic film with an all-black cast, so he began making plans to produce it independently with his own money. The few all-black films that had been made in Hollywood's history, including Hallelujah from 1929, Cabin in the Sky from 1943, and Stormy Weather also from 1943, had all failed to make money at the box office, which made studio executives extremely reluctant to take another chance on this type of project. Preminger had just finished making The Moon is Blue for United Artists, where executives Arthur Krim and Robert Benjamin had supported him through some difficult censorship battles, so he approached them first with Carmen Jones. Despite their previous positive relationship, Krim and Benjamin turned him down flat, telling Preminger they felt an operatic film with a black cast was not economically viable. Preminger later wrote in his autobiography that they told him he could make anything else he wanted for them, but not this particular film, and he soon discovered that most other companies in Hollywood felt exactly the same way. The surprise came when Darryl F. Zanuck, the head of 20th Century Fox, contacted Preminger while he was finishing post-production on River of No Return. Preminger had recently paid Fox $150,000 to cancel the remainder of his contract with them, so he was shocked when Zanuck asked to read the Carmen Jones script. Just 2 days later, Zanuck committed Fox to financing the entire production with $750,000. Fact 15. Film opened 1,955 Cannes. Despite French ban, the legal situation surrounding Carmen Jones in France created one of the strangest contradictions in film history. Despite the court ruling that banned the movie from being shown in French theaters due to the copyright lawsuit from the opera librettists' heirs, the film was actually permitted to open the prestigious Cannes Film Festival in 1955. This meant that Carmen Jones could be screened at one of the world's most important film festivals, which takes place on French soil every year, but regular French moviegoers couldn't see it at their local cinema down the street. The Cannes screening turned into a major event for reasons that went beyond just the film itself. Otto Preminger and Dorothy Dandridge attended the festival together, and for the first time they openly displayed their romantic relationship in public. Up until that point, they had kept their affair carefully hidden from the press and the public, which wasn't surprising given that Preminger was still married. And interracial relationships were heavily stigmatized in 1950s America. The glamorous setting of the French Riviera and the international atmosphere of Cannes apparently gave them the confidence to stop hiding their connection. The timing of this public revelation is particularly interesting when you consider that Dandridge would become pregnant with Preminger's child just a few months later, leading to the studio-forced abortion that would eventually end their relationship. The Cannes appearance represents one of the few moments when they could be together openly without fear of consequences, even though that freedom was short-lived. Meanwhile, regular French audiences would have to wait another 26 years before they could finally watch the film that had caused such a legal controversy.